So with life and with work, I've been away the past few weeks, but I'm back, and there are a ton of books that I want to talk about. It's time for another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast.
It's time for the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. The podcast you look forward to for all of your news and reviews of the best comic books hitting stands. Whether it's DC,
Batman, Wonder Woman,
Marvel,
Spider-Man,
Image,
Spawn, Saga,
Boom,
Once and Future, Power Rangers,
or whatever book or publisher you follow,
we cover them all here.
this is the place for you.
That's right, it's for everyone.
This is the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast.
Let's get it.
Hey folks, it's Theo. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. It's been a few weeks. I actually came down with a bad bug and I didn't have a lot of stuff going on with work. But I am back and we are here with another good episode. So this week, looking at the books from this past week, there were a ton that I ended up reading, and I wind things down to 10 titles, my normal top 5 and 5 honorable mentions. And with the exception of my top book for the week, the other 9 really could have easily been in a different place. The honorable mentions could have easily been in the top 4. The number 2 book could have easily been number 3 or 4 or 6. They were really that close when putting it together. However, I've decided on that order for this week, so I'll be going over my top 5, and then after that, I'll mention those honorable mentions as well. But before I get into the top 5 for this past week, I wanted to talk about an issue that came out this week, and this didn't make it into the top 10 books that I read, but it's still something after reading that I wanted to address just because of my personal thoughts on it. And that is all new Venom number 5 over at Marvel. So, of course, earlier this week, before the issue actually released to comic shops, it was already revealed that the person serving as the host for this all new Venom would turn out to be Mary Jane Watson, and that took me aback. And then I read the issue, and yeah, wasn't really pleased with how all of that turned out, and it's frustrating for me as someone who has been reading comics for quite a long time, and it seems Marvel is continuing to struggle to find something to do with Mary Jane when it's really obvious where Mary Jane should be right now. And if they need a hint, just kindly look over to what Jonathan Hickman is doing in Ultimate Spider-Man. But I mean, with Marvel, I am seeing a lot of the same mistakes and the same craziness that DC does when it comes to Bruce Wayne and Selena Kyle, and this notion that they will do whatever, whenever, however, to keep individuals who really appear to be soulmates from being soulmates. And for whatever reason, they will throw those characters into every type of situation to see what will stick. And it usually turns out that nothing does, and for some reason Marvel's continuing to do this with Mary Jane, whether it's putting her as Jackpot and then teaming her up with Felicia Hardy, aka Black Cat, who also is a former girlfriend of Peter Parker. Now this notion that she's the new Venom simply because she and Paul, who for some reason they feel he's a better person for her to be with than Peter, is watching over Eddie Brock's son, Dylan. This just, I don't know. I struggle when these types of things happen. Again, considering how long I've been reading Spider-Man as well as just comics in general. And believe me, I went through the, for the lack of better words, I went through the bullshit that is One More Day. And, you all know I interviewed Joe Quesada when, you know, a few years ago, and I expressed my disappointment there. And, you know, these reasons and all these things that they come up with as to why a Bruce and Selena can't be together and why Peter and Mary Jane can't be together, especially today, just makes zero sense. And yeah, I'm probably won't be reading all new Venom after this. Again, it doesn't make any sense to me, So she's gonna be walking around being Jackpot and Venom at the same time. It's just stupid. And yeah, I think that's all I'm really gonna say about it, because again, it is what it is. Marvel's not. I don't know what Marvel's doing, and all of this just throwing ideas to see which one sticks. And like I said, usually it never does. We'll probably see Eddie take over the symbiote again once he gets rid of Carnage. I don't get it. But yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about it. Very disappointed with how all of this turned out. You kind of figured that all of the obvious choices, whether it was Luke or whether it was Robbie, wasn't gonna happen. But the notion that the symbiote chose Mary Jane simply because she and Paul were keeping an eye on Dylan, and Dylan's connection to Eddie as Eddie's son is the reason that the symbiote wanted to be close to him and chose Mary Jane. It's dumb. It doesn't make sense to me, and that's my opinion. I'm pretty sure there are people who disagree, but yeah, just huge disappointment in how that all turned out. But it is what it is. Let's go ahead and jump into my top five, and then after that, I'll give my honorable mentions, and we'll see what's going to happen next week as well. So let's go on and jump into my top five books for this past week. Okay, in the number five spot, Moon Knight, Fist of Khonshu, number 7, written by Jed McKay with art by Domenico Carbone over at Marvel Comics. Hank Pym is back, y'all. Now, if you can remember when Mark made his return from the dead back at the end of the Blood Hunt event, he eventually early in this series, he revealed to Tigra that Hank Pym wasn't dead. He was actually alive, which kind of ticked her off. But as the series has gone on and Mark has been dealing with this issue with glitter, this drug that gets its users completely hooked, so much so that if they ever try to kick that withdrawal and kick that habit, they die. So Mark figures that the only person who can help him find a way to counteract the effects of glitter is Hank Pym. But Hank's nowhere to be found. He's shrunken himself down. He's gone somewhere. And so he and the rest of the team are now looking for a way to get Hank to come out of hiding. And the way that they figure, or at least the way that Mark figures to do this, is by going at the daughter of Hank and Janet Van Dyne. and that's Nadia, aka Wasp. And the way in which they do it is really funny, where uh, 8 Ball and the rest of the team basically disguise themselves. Well, everybody but 8 Ball. But everybody disguise themselves and they just go and be complete nuisances to Nadia in this attempt to bring Hank back. And they have no plans on harming her. They just want to be a complete nuisance and put her in a situation to where she appears in trouble enough that it brings Hank out. And this plan works. So eventually, Hank does come back. Uh, Mark reveals himself, takes himself out of disguise, and he explains, why he did what he did, and he explains he needs Hank's help in getting glitter off the street, but doing it in a way that it doesn't kill those who are hooked on it. But Hank is not interested. He figures, hey, Mark, Midnight Mission is your thing. But it takes Tigra, who, of course, used to be in a relationship with Hank, to get him to agree to do this plan. And in the end it was a really good conversation, not only with uh, Hank and Tigra, as she really explains how upset she was with everything that's happened, including his quote unquote death, but also between Hank and Mark as the series comes to an end. Because again, Hank agrees to help Mark with getting glitter off of the street, but he explains to Mark he understands his feelings for Tigra, and considering he had a relationship with her as well, and so that those three just seems that was a weird, well, I won't say weird, but uncomfortable sequence between those two. But I think Hank is in a place to where he is okay with Tigra uh, being in a relationship with Mark, and Mark having the feelings that he does for her. But we will now see what happens as Hank goes out to figure out a way to counteract glitter, which of course is a drug that's infused with Asgardian magic and Asgardian chemistry. And so hopefully, over the next few issues, he comes up with a plan on counteracting glitter, because Mark doesn't believe he can win this war if he doesn't get glitter off the streets first. And so we shall see how all of that plays out. From an art aspect, one of the things that I have had somewhat of concern with, and this has been the case ever since Jed McKay has been on Moon Knight in the other runs of the character. And again, this is me being the old timer, someone who has been reading comics since a kid. I the only number one of Moon Knight that I don't have is his first appearance in Werewolf by Night. So I've been reading the character for quite a long time, and I am still struggling to get used to this new appearance of Mark. So it's not something that I totally fault Domenico Carbone and all the other artists who have drawn this version of Moon Knight. It's just from a personal taste standpoint, I'm used to the character that has always been in all white, and so this look on Mark is still something that is growing on me. So hopefully you'll get there. Mark, and Mark Spector and Moon Knight has been one of my favorite characters. She-Hulk, and Batman have been my top three for as long as I've been collecting comics. And if you know my story, I've been doing that since I was 9 years old. So we'll see. Eventually, I'll accept it and I'll get over it. But again, it, it has been tough for me to be as interested in Moon Knight as I've been since Jed McKay has been doing it. However, uh, this has been a good series from him, and I'm really enjoying what he's doing, not just with Moon Knight, but also what he's doing over with the Avengers. But that is my number 5 book for the week. Moon Knight, Fist of Khonshu, number 7, written by Jed McKay with art from Domenico Carbone over at Marvel Comics. In the number 4 spot, Absolute Green Lantern number 1, written by Al Ewing with art from Janoy Lindsay over at DC Comics. It's the latest addition to DC's Absolute Universe within this All In initiative, and it focuses on Joe Million and Hal Jordan. They're both in this series. As a matter of fact, we see and hear the names of some of the other famous Green Lantern Corps members, with John Stewart and Guy Gardner being around as well. But this is really dark when you get to the bottom of it, and you get through it. Hal Jordan is walking along the road into this town, and he's stopped by a cop, and the cop is trying to talk to him, see where he's going on this hot day, where he's coming from, and Hal is hiding something. His hand is in his pocket. The cop asks him to take it out. He refuses. He continues to ask him, and at this point, he's pulled his gun. And at the point Hal pulls his hand out of his pocket, there's this blast of sorts, and the cop is gone. Uh, at that point, we get a backstory, and this is where we see Hal sitting with Joe and with John, and of course, they're talking about Guy. And apparently, Joe used to be a cop, and Guy apparently is the sheriff of this town, and he's trying to get Joe to come back onto the force. But as the trio are talking, the town that they're living in, and it's called Evergreen, is basically not necessarily attacked, but an appearance occur, and we see this giant thing just basically drop onto the town. And Hal goes out and he attempts to, see what's going on. And we don't get the full story of everything, what happens between the point he goes out and he touches this item that falls to the ground in Evergreen. But we get back, and again, he's walking along on this road. It's hot outside. He gets into this diner, and he asks for a cup of water. And at this point, they show the story of what's going on in Evergreen. And basically, it looks like the town has this big, huge Green Lantern symbol that's basically fallen on top of the town. And from this backstory, Hal says it's almost like there's a force field of sorts. But Hal's role in this has a lot more to play in it. And we see, he is really not himself as he's speaking to these people. And they too, at this point, realize that he has his hand in his pocket. He's never taken it out. And then we hear the word Abensor. And if you all remember Green Lantern history, Abensor is the Green Lantern who ended up giving Hal Jordan his ring to become a Green Lantern. But a couple of things about this version of Abensor. He looks sinister in the sky, standing there as Hal mentioned him in this backstory. But the other thing, and this was brought to my attention from Ian Miller over at the Batman universe as we were talking about it, Abensor looks a whole lot like Saint Walker. Saint Walker, the much beloved Blue Lantern of Hope. But yeah, Abensor looks a lot like him, and he does. But the town and the people in this diner, they're now getting a little impatient with Hal. Because again, he's talking about making mistakes in Evergreen and knowing, part of what's going on in Evergreen. And yeah, again, they're very impatient. Tell him, hey, what type of weapon did this Abensor give you? Take your hands out your pocket. And, at this point, they pulled guns on him. And as Hal goes to take his hand out of his pocket, he tells him, hey, this thing reacts to danger. Uh, but before he can even finish that sentence, this black goo of sorts, just starts to cover his arm and it blasts throughout the entire restaurant. And it looks like it takes out everyone. Uh, but the story ends where, Hal is lamenting over what happened. This was not something that he wanted. But as he's standing there, looking at the devastation within that diner, the door opens and, someone asks what has happened to him. And it's Joe. And Joe is covered in the green of the Green Lantern. And of course, she has the Green Lantern symbol that's shining on her. But I think this is the good way to begin this story. Especially considering how I've been feeling about other stuff that Al Ewing has been doing. Uh, but yeah, something tells me this world of Green Lantern is going to be pretty dark if you read the solicits about some of the upcoming issues of the series. You know, Joe apparently is the Green Lantern that is of this absolute universe, but somehow Hal is going to play a major role in this as well. It's going to be a dark one, but it was a very good introduction into this new series. I really like the art, especially at the end, and I'm excited to see where it goes. Especially considering I'm assuming at some point all of these all of these characters that they are introducing into the Absolute Universe will somehow come together to be the Justice League of the Absolute Universe. But when it comes to what's going on in Green Lantern, I'm wondering, how much more of the core we will see. Like I said, we've already seen John Stewart. We've already heard Guy Gardner mentioned, and we know that he's the sheriff of this town of Evergreen. So I wonder how many more members of the core that might come, or at least of the Green Lantern universe that might come out and make an appearance of sorts. So, will Kyle come out? Will Jessica or will Simon Boz make an appearance? We shall see. But I think this is a good start. I'm absolutely excited to see what's going to happen with this. Outside of Batman and Superman, this might be the one that I've been most anticipating, being a huge fan of Joe Million. So we shall see how that all plays out. But again, that is my number 4 title for this week. Absolute Green Lantern #1. Written by Al Ewing with art from Janoy Lindsay over at DC Comics. Alright, in the number 3 spot, Batgirl #6, written by Tate Brombo with art from Takeshi Miyazawa over at DC Comics. I continue to love this series. I continue to spend a whole lot of money on this series, simply because I can never just buy one cover. I have to get them all. And from a story aspect, I have really loved Tate Brombo's take on Cassandra Cain. She is having a struggle with who she is, especially in relation with her mom. And so as we saw in the last issue, she went to rescue Shiva from the Unburied and ended up getting caught herself. But eventually, JS shows up and saves them both. And as they attempt to, get out from this stronghold of the Unburied, he's killed. However, also happening in this story, we find out a little bit more about the Unburied and why they have this beef with Shiva. And of course, Shiva doing Shiva things. She saw going and infiltrating the Unburied's homeland as just another test, another game for her. And because of that, they have this beef to go after her and take her out. But what we also learn is that we have Calden, who seems to be the leader of the group. However, we find out that he's not, and there's actually someone else. So we don't necessarily know who this person is yet. Uh, but at some point, Cassandra has really had enough, and she tells Shiva, "Hey, once we are done here, once we are able to escape and get out, I am done with you. I don't want to see you ever again." And Shiva's content with that. But the Unburied doesn't give up, and they continue to chase them. And as Shiva and Cass finally make their way out, uh, Shiva realizes the only way she can protect Cassandra is to give herself up. And so she appears to sacrifice herself in order to allow Cassandra to get away. And we see here again this struggle with Cassandra to recognize and understand the relationship between a mother and her child. Again, of course, she sees Bruce as her father, but she's never truly been raised by a mother. When she was born, Shiva really gave her up, and she was raised entirely by her dad, David Kane. And then, of course, depending upon the continuity you follow, she becomes attached to Batman. In this latest continuity, it happened at the end of Batman and Robin Eternal as we get into Rebirth, and she joined the team in Detective Comics. But she's always had this attachment to men in her life, whether it was David Kane or whether it's Bruce Wayne. And so she struggled to understand the relationship between a mother and a child. And Tay Bramwell does a good job in really trying to play out the struggle that's going through her head. And we've seen, her lash out at Shiva, her being Cassandra, lash out at Shiva many times. But now we see, as she sees Shiva making the ultimate sacrifice in giving herself up to allow her to get away, we see her, really attach herself to Shiva to the point she says, "I choose you." And that's something that she's never really done. She's always resisted and pushed back, even in this issue where she tells Shiva she doesn't want to see her again. But when she sees that Shiva is willing to make this sacrifice to save her, Cassandra really accepts who she is as Shiva's daughter. But Cassandra gets away at the insistence of Shiva, who apparently again dies at the hands of the Unburied. And we're going to see how that all plays out. I don't necessarily think Shiva is dead. Uh, and even if they do kill her, hey, it is the comics. So I hope that she comes back again. Uh, but we've seen a couple of folks die or supposedly die over at DC this past week. But yeah, I don't know. But anyway, with this story itself, I have truly been enjoying what Tate Bromble has been doing with Cassandra and this struggle with Shiva as they battle the unburied. And so I can only imagine what happens next as we go into this next arc of the series. But again, I've just been loving it from the start. The art has been great. The covers have been wonderful. Again, I cannot not buy just one. The second cover with Shiva and Cass, just staring at each other by Inhook Lee is just beautiful. And so, of course, the main cover from David Talaski I always pick up as well. So yeah, this has always just been a immediately first read as soon as it's available, and I am quick to scan it and put it as a part of my collection. I have every single Batgirl title series issue involving Cassandra, and I don't intend on stopping with this one. But that is my number 3 book for this week, Batgirl number 6, written by Tate Bromble with art by Takeshi Miyazawa over at DC Comics. Okay, number 2 book for this week, Gatchaman number 8, written by Cullen Bunn with art by Chris Batista over at Mad Cave Studios. I have been in a huge Gatchaman phase for quite a while, since the free comic book day issue of Gatchaman came out last year, and it has been quite intense. I recently picked this up from the store, the complete collection of the original Science Ninja Team Gatchaman series from the 70s. Picked up a couple of other issues with variant covers from the series. And as you know, I just recently interviewed Tommy Lee Edwards about Only One Earth. There's just a whole bunch that I have been getting myself more entrenched to with Gatchaman, and it's primarily due to what these guys over at Mad Cave have been doing with this new universe of theirs. So with issue number 8 of Gatchaman, it's a continuation of last issue where Galactor has released this mist upon Porcelain City that basically enrages all of those who breathe it. And last issue, Joe became entranced with this mist after his mask got knocked off of him. And so he's been going at Ken and trying to get him to fight. And so we see a continuation of that in this issue. And it gets to a point, he gets Ken's mask off of him as well. And now they're both enraged and they're just ready to take each other out. And in that, we see them talk a lot about how there's this discontent amongst the two of them, especially considering Ken is G1 and Joe is G2, and so he's never been able to surpass Ken to be the leader of the Science Ninja Team. But there's a lot going on here. Of course, there has always been this tension between Ken and Joe, and that has existed ever since this So, it's not something new. If you are a fan of Gatchaman, you know that Joe and Ken has always had this tension between them. And we now see it even more so with this issue. We also see it in Tommy Lee Edwards miniseries right now, Only One Earth, where they've kind of had their back and forths. But now we really see them going to blows with one another, and eventually they get over it. But using just their willpower to fight this trance that they were put in because of this mist. But eventually, of course, the town is saved and things get back to normal. But there's something else that's going on, something more sinister. And if you can remember, in issue 7, we were introduced to Deiko, who is supposedly this martial arts specialist that has been hired by the ISO to train the other ninja recruits, these recruits that they want to have ready just in case they need to replace the Science Ninja team one day. And so they brought him in to give them some fighting tips. And he's been manipulating them, telling them they're not good enough. They'll never be good enough. And eventually he corners Mara, who is basically the Ken of this recruitment class. And, again, just uses this manipulation to, you know, make her question herself. But he offers to train her. And as he walks away and walks into into his quarters, we see that Daiko is actually Burkatse in disguise. And so the issue ends with Burkatse just in this evil laugh that he is famous for. And so that's how the issue ends. But again, I've been enjoying, everything with the Gatchaman universe. I remember, I once questioned whether or not the universe of Gatchaman and the miniseries and the Galacto miniseries and the one shots, if they were all tied together in one universe. And slowly but surely, I am seeing that it is in many ways. If you can remember the conversation I had with Tommy Lee Edwards, he mentioned how eventually we're going to see Cullen Bunn start to drop hints to the existence of this new character that he is eventually going to do either a miniseries or a one shot on. I believe he said it was a one shot, but Cullen Bunn's going to kick that off. And we see in the Galacto series that Steve Orlando did how Burkatse used manipulation and disguise to, infiltrate his enemies, to take them out. And now we see him doing the same to infiltrate the ISO. So the world of Gatchaman is more tied together than I initially thought, and I'm happy for that. By all means, having one universe, one continuity is always best. Despite the different writing styles of those producing those stories, Tom Lee Edwards admitted, he's more of a darker writer with this universe than Cullen Bunn is, which is weird considering Cullen Bunn's forte is writing horror. But I continue to enjoy and just love this series, the main series of Gatchaman, and I just can't wait to see what's next. And this partnership with that Man Cave has with the folks who own the property of Gatchaman is continuing to grow. The news came out of them reprinting the volumes of Infinity Force. That's going to be coming out soon. I believe the first volume is going to be in June this year, and I'm hoping I can sit down with them to, or at least the editor of the Infinity Force reprint over at Nakayama, which is a division of Mad Cave, to talk about what to expect with that, and what fans who may not have been exposed to Infinity Force can expect from that once the first volume comes out. And supposedly they're going to reprint all of the volumes in English, so I'm excited for that. I actually started watching one of the Infinity Force animated movies that are out, so that is out there. But again, I'm hoping to sit down with the editor of that graphic novel reprint over at Nakayama Press to just get some insight as to what's going on and what fans can expect. And I'm hoping to get a chance to sit down with Steve Orlando as well, to talk about the one shot that he's getting ready to do, or it's already done, but it's getting ready to come out in a few weeks, that focuses on Ryu. But everything with Gatchaman has just been great. I've absolutely been loving it. And the art just continues to be spectacular. Again, I've always talked about how Chris Bautista just gives this Saturday morning feel to the work that he's doing. And it's complemented by the colors from Carlos Lopez, and it's just a great feel. And again, it's not Saturday morning cartoon when you look at it from the standpoint of the original Gatchaman series from the 70s, but just that modern cartoon feel that, if you look at some of the other Saturday morning cartoon editions of comics that are out there, particularly from IDW, you'll kind of get the idea of what I'm talking about, with just how the characters are depicted, and just how bright the pages are. But I'm absolutely loving it. And I can't say enough about the covers from Inaki Miranda. Absolutely love everything about it. But again, that is my number 2 book for the week, Gatchaman number 8, written by Cullen Bunn, with art from Chris Bautista, over at Mad Cave Studios. And so we have reached the number 1 spot for this week. And my number 1 book, Daredevil, Cold Day in Hell, number 1, written by Charles Soule, with art from Steve McNevin over at Marvel Comics. If you are a fan of The Dark Knight Returns, this title is for you. And that is the vibe that I got from page 1 reading this last week. What we see here is matters of age. He's old, and he's apparently lost his power. He no longer has his radar ability. Everything that made Matt Daredevil is gone. But one event, which is this explosion in this train station, brings it all back, and brings back to where he pulls out the Daredevil suit one last time. But it is really great to see how Charles Soule put this story together. We see some familiar faces in here, with Steve Rogers giving his life to not only save this girl, who apparently is being chased, but also to save Matt, who has now got his abilities back. And he gives his life to save both of them, telling Matt to protect the girl from these guys that set off this bomb, who are, for some reason, coming after her. We haven't learned that reason just yet. But we also get an appearance of Frank Castle, who does not look anything like Frank Castle. So there's no Punisher outfit or anything of that nature. But it was a great story. Like I said, if you are a fan of what Frank Miller did with The Dark Knight Returns and how Bruce Wayne, decided to put the suit back on, you would enjoy this. Now, Matt doesn't put the Daredevil outfit back on until the end of the issue, but he does it, and I was excited to see that. And just everything was just if everything had a Dark Knight feel to it. At first, it almost felt like this could have been the end of a life story event. If you remember the life story issues or the life story mini series that Marvel put on with the Fantastic Four and with Spider-Man, seeing those individuals just grow up regularly. You can kind of get that feel, but no, by the end, it really was more of a Frank Miller, The Dark Knight Return feel vibe that I got from it. And it goes down to the art as well. Steve McNiven, isn't a David Mazzucchelli, but the feel from his drawing really gave those vibes as well. And I truly enjoyed it. Everything just it felt like you were looking at New York in a different time. And it was a different time because everyone that we've known as heroes there are either dead, a few die, in this issue, particularly Steve Rogers. And we see Frank Castle in the condition he's in, which is really horrific. I'm not sure how he's staying alive. Maybe we'll learn that as the other issues are released. But this is a different New York that we're living in. This is a different Hell's Kitchen. And I'm excited to just see where this story goes. But I am on board and just absolutely loved every bit about this issue. So I can't wait for issue number 2 to come out. But that is my number one book. I wasn't expecting it to be, but yeah, I am happy I read that issue and truly enjoyed it. It was great work, which I should expect from someone like Charles Soule. I've been a huge fan of his, whether it's 8 Billion Genies, whether it was his run on She-Hulk. It's just, I've enjoyed his work, and the same applies to this story here with Daredevil. But again, that is my number one book for this week. Daredevil, Cold Day in Hell, number 1. Written by Charles Soule with art from Steve McNiven over at Marvel Comics. And so, there you have it. My top 5 books for this past week. Moon Knight vs. Khonshu, number 7. Absolute Green Lantern, number 1. Batgirl, number 6. Gatchaman, number 8. And my number 1 book for this week, Daredevil, Cold Day in Hell, number 1, over at Marvel Comics. So, before closing out, as always, let's get into my honorable mentions for this week. First up, over at DC Comics, Absolute Superman number 6 from Jason Aaron with guest artist Carmine Di Giandomenico. This really could have been number 5. I think the one thing that put Moon Knight over the top was how they brought back Hank Pym and that interaction with he, Mark, and Tigress. That was just that kind of put it over the top for me. But this was a really good issue as well when looking at how Kal-El met and grew up with the Kents of the Absolute Universe. So that is the first of my honorable mentions. Then next up, over at Skybound Image, G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, Beachhead #1. So what what Skybound Image or what Skybound is doing to celebrate the anniversary of G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero #21. And if you're not familiar with that, that is the infamous and beloved Silent Interlude issue, which introduced Storm Shadow into the comic universe. But they are doing a series of books that will kind of be in the same format where the story will be told without any words. And so the Beachhead issue is the first one up. It was a really good one, taking a look at it from Phil Hester, and he had some colors done from Lee Luridge. Really good issue. And I think the next one up is Jinx that they're going to be doing. But again, it was a good issue with telling the story of Beachhead and how this family saved him after he was injured in a battle with some Cobra soldiers. And we'll see how the next one is with Jinx. But that was a real good one. That was G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, Beachhead #1. Then let's go on back to DC Comics. We have Birds of Prey #20 from Kelly Thompson with art from Sammy Basri. There's somebody that's hunting the birds, and they seem to have taken out Big Bada already. So we will see how that plays out. And it was a really good issue. Like I said, I have been really enjoying Birds of Prey, especially since Babs have found her way onto the team, and it seems like that is where she's going to stay. And I have no complaints about that. But we'll see how this next issue comes out. Now that Big Bada has been taken off of the board. Then we then stay at DC Comics Secret Six #2. So I was kind of disappointed in Secret Six #1. It didn't really seem to go anywhere for me. But in issue 2, Nicole Maines really brings to light a lot of the things that have been going on with the particular members of this team that's going to be put together. Uh, of course, we know that Jay and John are having some issues, particularly with Dreamer being around and the fact that John sides with her a lot. But in the end, the real story of interest is that yes, they are all looking for the whereabouts of Amanda Waller, but from the standpoint of Dreamer and Deadshot, it is for different reasons. And in the end, we are going to see a eventual battle probably play out between those two, because apparently for Deadshot, Amanda Waller has the secrets that he really needs. For some reason, we don't know what that secret is, but he feels that they need to keep Amanda Waller alive to keep Checkmate, who seem to be back now, from extracting those secrets. And then once they extract those secrets, probably kill her. Or if they realize that she doesn't have those secrets because her memory's been taken, they're gonna kill her. But we do know from reading the issue that her memories are back. And then for Dreamer, she doesn't want Amanda Waller to get those memories back. So she wants to find her to kill her. And which is weird considering she had a chance to do so in Absolute Power when she wiped, and we found out that she didn't wipe those memories, she just hidden them from her. which was again kind of crazy. I would have wiped it myself if I had the opportunity to do so, if I wasn't going to kill her. But I don't know what is going to happen. There is this strange triangle, and I'm not saying it's a love triangle, but there's this weird triangle between Dreamer, John, and Jay that may come to a head in Secret Six as well. But that was my next honorable mention. And then finally, last honorable mention for this week is Star Trek Lore War #1. So, over at IDW, of course. So, as you all know, when it comes to the Star Trek universe, Defiant has been my favorite of the two main Star Trek titles, meaning Star Trek Defiant and the main Star Trek title. Uh, but this is going to close out IDW's run with Star Trek, or at least this particular run with Star Trek. And it's vital for me to read it just to see how things close out, because Lore War is going to include both titles, much as uh, Day of Blood uh, happened with Kalis and the Klingons and all that happened with that. So, despite the fact that it's going into all of this, I'll use the term metaphysical aspects, with Lore being seen as this god. And, again, if you follow me, I'm not a huge fan of Benjamin Sisko, but we will see how Heather Antos, who is the group editor for the Star Trek books over at IDW, we will see how she and the creative team of Jackson Lansing, Colin Kelly, and Christopher Cantwell bring their time on Star Trek to a close. And they're doing this with Lore War. So we will see how that all plays out. But that is my last honorable mention for the week, which is Star Trek Lore War #1. So there you have it. My top 5 books for this past week, as well as my top 5 honorable mentions. Again, other than Daredevil, those remaining 9 books really were interchangeable in their place within the top 9 for this past week. Either of them could have been in either position with how good they were. But that is going to do it for this week's episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. Next week, I am going to be sitting with comic book writer Stephanie Williams. We're going to be sitting down talking about some of her past projects, some of her current stuff, as well as what she's working on in the future. I've been waiting for this interview for quite a while. She and I have been talking back and forth for quite a while since she appeared at Fan Expo New Orleans back in January. So I'm excited to finally sit with her and just talk about some of the stuff she's working on. And then from a comic book standpoint, it's going to be a light week for books that I am looking at reading. Over at DC Comics, Absolute Batman #7 is out. The 3rd issue of Green Lantern Corps from Jeremy Adams and Morgan Hampton. And then Aquaman #4, also from Jeremy Adams. Then over at Marvel Comics, Daredevil #20, The Ultimates #11, and then Storm #7. And then finally, moving on over to Image, we have Transformers #19 from the Energon universe, and Geiger #13. So again, light week from a reading standpoint, but I'm looking forward to the sit down with Stephanie Williams, and I will see you all next time. That is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I'd like to thank you all for your continued support of the program. The Comic Bin Podcast, as well as the Comic Book Spot, are a part of the Comic Book Source family of sites and media. You can follow the podcast on Twitter X at comic_bin, or my personal account at batmanfan_4life. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. We're all over social media. You can also follow our sister site over at thebatmanuniverse.net for all of your news and reviews in the world of Batman. Tune in next time as we give you more in the world of comic books. Again, we truly appreciate your support. But until we meet again next time, keep reading those comics.